Let me paint a picture and tell me if this feels uncomfortably familiar. Two professionals. She works in operations, earning $68,000 a year. He's in cybersecurity, making $74,000. Together, that's $142,000 in household income. That places them solidly above average. Statistically speaking, they're in the upper tier of earners. On paper, this should feel like abundance. Retirement accounts should be filling up, vacations should be planned without anxiety, savings should be steady. Instead, they feel squeezed. They're hovering paycheck to paycheck, maybe 3 months of expenses saved if nothing goes wrong. When the water heater failed in March, it went straight onto a credit card. They both work full-time, often more. Evenings are short, weekends are for errands and recovery. And here's the frustrating part. They followed the formula. Degrees, careers, marriage, shared finances, home purchase in a good area, they checked every responsible adult box. So why does it still feel unstable? Why does earning well into six figures feel fragile? If you've ever looked at your combined income and thought, there's no reason we should feel this stretched, this is where things start to make sense. And I've spent an unhealthy amount of time studying why dual-earner households today often feel less secure than single-earner households decades ago. We were sold a simple equation: 2 incomes equals more security. Mathematically, it seems obvious. If one person earning $60,000 can support a family, then 2 people earning $60,000 should provide extra room for investing and building wealth. That's arithmetic, but that's not what unfolded. What unfolded was something Elizabeth Warren described in 2003, long before her political career, when she was a Harvard bankruptcy law professor. In a book she co-authored with her daughter, based on research of over 2,000 bankruptcy cases, she introduced what she called the 2-income trap. Her findings were counterintuitive. Households with 2 earners were not safer. They were often more exposed. In fact, dual-income families were statistically more likely to declare bankruptcy than single-income families. Pause on that. Twice the paychecks, twice the effort, and higher vulnerability. That's not poor budgeting, that's structural. To understand it, we have to rewind to 1970. Back then, roughly 43% of women participated in the workforce. The typical middle-class family had one primary earner and one parent managing the household full-time. And here's the key. That single income was generally sufficient. Data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and census records show that a median household could purchase a median-priced home while allocating about 25% of income toward housing. Public schools were less tied to extreme property price gaps. Healthcare costs were lower relative to income. One car, modest savings, occasional vacation, most importantly, margin. And they had a reserve lever. If the primary earner lost a job, the non-working spouse could enter the labor market. That second income was dormant protection. Fast forward to today, female labor participation sits near 57%, significantly higher among married mothers. In over 60% of married households with children, both parents work. The backup plan became standard operating mode. Now look at the numbers. Median household income in 2023 was roughly $74,000. Adjusted for inflation, that's higher than 1970. But median home prices adjusted for inflation were near $200,000 in 1970. In 2023, over $400,000. Housing costs doubled relative to income growth. Healthcare spending per household has risen more than 600% since 1970. Childcare, which was negligible when one parent stayed home, now averages around $11,000 per child annually nationally, and far higher in urban areas. College tuition has risen over 1,200% since 1980. The fixed costs of middle-class participation exploded. And what absorbed those increases? The second income. Every additional dollar. Dual-income families didn't double their cushion. They eliminated their margin and used both engines just to maintain cruising speed. And if you're thinking, we manage our money carefully, that doesn't apply to us, let's isolate the second paycheck and examine what really happens. That's where the math becomes uncomfortable. Let's isolate the second paycheck and strip away the illusion. Suppose one partner earns $82,000 and the other earns $60,000, bringing the household to $142,000. That $60,000 feels powerful on paper,
But because of progressive tax brackets, that second income sits on top of the first. Federal tax, state tax, and payroll taxes can easily remove 30 to 35%. Suddenly, that $60,000 shrinks to roughly $39,000 or $40,000 in take-home pay. The headline number already looks very different. Now add childcare. The national average for full-time daycare is about $15,000 per child annually. 2 children can push that to $30,000 without blinking. That single category alone can nearly consume the after-tax value of the second income. And this isn't luxury spending, it's the cost of being able to work. Transportation compounds it. 2 full-time jobs usually require 2 commutes. Gas, maintenance, insurance, depreciation, and possibly a second vehicle payment can conservatively total $7,000 to $9,000 per year, tied specifically to the second worker. Parking fees or tolls add more in metropolitan areas. The remaining margin from that $60,000 continues narrowing. Then comes what researchers often call convenience or exhaustion spending. Dual-income households consistently spend more on prepared meals, takeout, cleaning services, lawn care, subscription conveniences, and outsourcing domestic tasks, not because they're reckless, but because time and energy are limited. After 10-hour workdays, including commute, cooking from scratch and repairing appliances yourself become less realistic. It's easy for these added costs to reach about $5,000 to $8,000 per year compared to a household where one adult handles more home labor. Added up, $60,000 minus roughly $20,000 in combined taxes, minus $15,000 for one child's daycare, minus perhaps $8,000 in commuting costs, minus $6,000 in exhaustion-related spending. The net contribution of that second full-time income can realistically fall into the low thousands annually. In higher-cost areas or with multiple children, it can disappear entirely. Yet, psychologically, decisions are made based on the gross combined income of $142,000. Mortgage approvals are calculated from that number. Car loans are sized from that number. Lifestyle expectations expand to match that number. Banks do not underwrite assuming one partner may burn out, get laid off, or step back for caregiving. They assume uninterrupted dual income. This is where the trap tightens. The single-income household decades ago had an inactive reserve. The non-working spouse could seek employment during crisis. The modern dual-income household has already activated both engines. If one income stops, fixed expenses often cannot flex downward quickly enough. Mortgage payments, insurance premiums, and childcare contracts remain. Elizabeth Warren's research highlighted this fragility. Bankruptcy wasn't primarily triggered by luxury splurging. It was triggered by income shocks combined with high fixed obligations. When a family operates at full capacity with no buffer, even a modest disruption can cascade. Like an engine running at maximum output with no coolant, it performs until one small failure overheats the entire system. A 2019 Federal Reserve survey reported that nearly 40% of Americans could not cover a $400 emergency without borrowing or selling something. Many of those households were not low income. They were stretched dual earners with little margin. The problem wasn't laziness, it was structural exposure. And the expenses absorbing that second income were largely non-optional: housing, healthcare, childcare, education. As 2 incomes became normal, home prices were bid upward. School districts funded by property taxes intensified competition for good neighborhoods. 2 incomes became the entry requirement for what one income once purchased. The market recalibrated. The result is an arms race where everyone escalated and no one gained security. 2 incomes increased purchasing power temporarily, but over time they redefined the baseline cost of participation. Now both paychecks are required just to stand still.
Now look at what happens after the baseline expands. When 2 incomes become normal, markets quietly adjust upward. Housing prices reflect what dual earners can afford, not what a single income can sustain. Property taxes rise alongside valuations. School districts in desirable areas become bidding wars funded by combined salaries. What once required one stable paycheck now silently requires 2. Healthcare costs add another fixed layer.
Employer-sponsored insurance ties coverage to employment, which means losing a job can mean losing medical security at the same time income drops. COBRA premiums or private insurance can cost thousands per month. A dual-earner family with children can see healthcare expenses rival a mortgage payment. That risk doesn't shrink just because gross income looks strong. Student loans compound the pressure. Many dual-income households are servicing two sets of education debts simultaneously. Those monthly payments are fixed, inflexible, and often stretch across decades. Add childcare contracts, car payments, insurance premiums, utilities, and a mortgage sized for combined income, and the household develops a high fixed cost structure. High fixed costs mean low flexibility. This is where fragility hides. On paper, the family appears affluent. In reality, their survival depends on uninterrupted performance from both earners. If one partner experiences burnout, illness, job loss, or chooses to step back for caregiving, the entire structure destabilizes. Expenses don't automatically fall by 50% when income does. The system has no slack built in. Contrast that with a household that intentionally lives below one income. The second income becomes surplus rather than requirement. That surplus can build an emergency fund, eliminate debt, or accelerate investing. In this structure, one paycheck covers necessities and the other builds resilience. If disruption occurs, the household contracts rather than collapses. Behavioral economics explains why many families miss this shift. When income rises, spending rises gradually in response. This is lifestyle creep. Each upgrade feels modest in isolation: a slightly larger home, a newer vehicle, a better neighborhood, private lessons for the kids, more subscriptions. None of these choices seem reckless individually. Together, they raise the minimum cost of maintaining life. The psychological trap deepens because gross income creates a perception of safety. A family earning $150,000 feels secure compared to one earning $60,000, but security is not defined by income. It is defined by the gap between income and required expenses. A $60,000 household spending $40,000 may be more resilient than a $150,000 household spending $145,000. Margin is what absorbs shocks. Research following bankruptcy cases found that job loss and medical events were among the most common triggers, not irresponsible spending sprees. The pattern wasn't extravagance, it was exposure. Dual-income households had optimized for maximum earning capacity, not maximum flexibility. When disruption hit, there was no backup engine. Over time, this structure produces chronic stress. Both partners know, consciously or not, that stepping off the treadmill carries high consequences. That pressure influences career decisions, parenting time, relocation options, and even health. The household is earning more, but freedom is narrower. The key insight is that higher income does not automatically equal higher security. Without intentional constraint on fixed expenses, rising income can quietly reduce optionality. The goal is not to reject dual incomes, but to prevent them from becoming mandatory for survival. Security grows from surplus, not scale. The final shift is psychological. Once both incomes become required, choice slowly disappears. Careers are no longer evaluated based on meaning, growth, or flexibility, but on stability and salary continuity. A toxic job becomes tolerable because the mortgage depends on it. Burnout becomes manageable because stepping back feels financially dangerous. The household appears successful, yet internally it feels constrained. This is where redefining the goal changes everything. Instead of maximizing income, the objective becomes maximizing resilience. Resilience means lowering fixed expenses relative to income. It means designing a lifestyle that can survive on one paycheck, even if two are available. The second income becomes strategic capital rather than structural necessity. Practically, this begins with calculating the true baseline. What does it cost to run the household without upgrades? Housing, food, insurance, transportation, utilities, debt service. Strip away aspirational spending and isolate the survival number. Then compare that to one income alone. If the gap is small or negative, the household is operating at full capacity. If there is room, that margin is optionality. Next comes intentional allocation. Rather than allowing raises to expand lifestyle automatically, pre-commit where increases go. A percentage toward debt elimination, a percentage toward emergency reserves, a percentage toward investments. When the second income accelerates asset growth instead of expense growth, it builds independence. Over time, investments begin covering portions of fixed costs, reducing dependence on employment. This is the compounding effect most people underestimate. A household that invests $30,000 annually with average long-term returns can accumulate significant capital within 15 years. Each invested dollar lowers future required labor. Each avoided lifestyle upgrade lowers the income needed for stability. The gap widens in your favor. The real power appears during disruption. If one partner chooses to pause work for caregiving, education, entrepreneurship, or recovery, the household adjusts instead of panicking. Expenses are already structured to function on one income. Savings act as shock absorbers. Instead of crisis, it becomes transition. There is also a cultural layer. When dual incomes became standard, markets recalibrated to absorb them. Housing prices, childcare costs, and education expenses rose accordingly. Opting out of full dependency on two incomes can feel countercultural, but the goal is not status alignment, it is risk management. Financial strength is not how much flows in, it is how much must flow in. Security is created by margin. Margin is created by restraint, and restraint is easiest when defined intentionally rather than imposed by crisis. Two incomes are not the problem. Dependence on both is. When one paycheck can cover life and the other builds freedom, the household moves from fragile to flexible. In the end, wealth is measured not by the size of the engine, but how quietly it can idle without stalling. The most stable households are not those running at maximum output, but those with built-in slack. And slack is what turns income into independence rather than obligation.